Elena Walker never imagined that her last day in the jungle would begin with the sound of furious hooves tearing through the wet earth behind her. But there she was, running between giant trees while a herd of wild boars charged at her with sharp tusks gleaming under the green light filtered through the tree canopy, her heart pounding so hard it felt like it would explode from her chest, her lungs burning, her legs heavy as lead after 5 days lost in that hostile Central American jungle, without food, without communication. Only her torn camouflage uniform stuck to her sweaty body and a survival knife strapped to her thigh. And as she jumped over twisted roots and dodged vines that seemed to want to grab her, her mind went back 3 weeks, when it all began, when she first set foot on the Navy SEALs training base in Coronado, California, and the disdainful looks from the male instructors and recruits pierced her like invisible bullets, because Elena Walker was 6 feet tall, broad-shouldered, with defined muscles from years of CrossFit and mountain running. But she was still a woman, and for many there, that meant she didn't belong in that place, no matter how many push-ups she did, how many miles she ran, or how fast she disassembled and assembled a rifle. And Commander Jake Hartley, a 45-year-old man with scars on his face and a reputation for breaking recruits like dry branches, made it clear from day one that he didn't believe she would survive the first week, much less complete the infamous Hell Week, that week of brutal training where sleep was a luxury. Pain was constant and only the mentally strongest survived. But Elena wasn't there by chance. She came from a small town in rural Texas called Marfa, where she grew up on a ranch with her Vietnam veteran father, who taught her to shoot before she learned to read, to track animals in the woods before riding a bicycle. And when he died of cancer when she was 17, Elena swore before the flag-draped coffin that she would honor his legacy, that she would be stronger than any pain, more resilient than any obstacle. And that's how at 23 years old, after serving 4 years in the regular army with honors and 3 deployments in the Middle East, she applied for the Female Integration Program in Special Forces, specifically for the SEALs, knowing it would be the most brutal challenge of her life. And she was right, because from day one, Commander Hartley treated her not just with rigor, but with something bordering on sadism, doubling her loads in exercises, shortening her rest times, shouting insults that cut deep not because they were vulgar but because they questioned her capability, her intelligence, her right to be there. And there were moments when Elena, lying on the cold sand of Coronado at 3 in the morning after carrying an inflatable boat on her head for hours, felt tears mix with sweat and salty seawater. But never, ever did she allow anyone to see her cry, because crying there was admitting weakness, and weakness was death. And so she continued, day after day, week after week, overcoming every impossible test, every timed obstacle course, every dive in freezing waters, every combat simulation, and she began to notice something strange. The other recruits, initially hostile or indifferent, began to respect her. Some even secretly admired her, because Elena didn't just survive, she excelled. Her time in the 6-mile run with boots was among the top 10. Her rifle accuracy was the second most precise in the entire class, and her ability to remain calm under extreme pressure impressed even the most skeptical veteran instructors, all except Hartley, who seemed determined to break her. And his opportunity came when they announced the final exercise before graduation, a 7-day survival mission in the Guatemalan jungle, where each recruit would be dropped alone at a random point with only a knife, a compass, and extraction. Coordinates 50 kilometers away, without food, without a detailed map, only skill, instinct, and will to survive. And Elena saw in Hartley's eyes when he handed her the coordinates that something was wrong. The paper seemed to have been folded and refolded, the coordinates handwritten instead of printed like the others. But she said nothing, just nodded, put the paper in her pocket and boarded the helicopter that would take her to the green hell. And when she jumped from the aircraft over the tree canopy, rappelling down to the ground covered with wet leaves and insects, she knew immediately that she was farther from the extraction point than she should be. The vegetation was denser, the terrain more rugged, and when she checked the compass and calculated the distance, she realized that Hartley had deliberately placed her 20 kilometers farther than the other recruits. A clear sabotage, a final attempt to make her fail, and the anger she felt at that moment was like liquid fire in her veins. But she channeled that anger into determination, put away the compass, adjusted the knife on her thigh, and began to walk. And the first 2 days were relatively manageable. She found a stream for water, improvised traps to catch small animals, built basic shelters to spend the nights. But on the 3rd day the fever came, probably from some infected insect bite, and Elena began to hallucinate as she walked, seeing her father's face among the trees, hearing Hartley's voice saying she would never be good enough. And it was in this weakened state, at the end of the 5th day, that she stumbled into territory she shouldn't have invaded, a feeding area for wild boars. And before she could retreat silently, the wind changed direction, carrying her scent to the herd, and the largest of the boars, a huge male with tusks the size of knives, raised its head, sniffed the air, and charged. And Elena ran like she had never run in her life, even with the fever making her body shake, even with her leg muscles screaming for relief, because she knew that if she fell, if those tusks reached her, it would be the end. There would be no rescue, no second chance. And as the boars chased her through the dense jungle, she made a split-second decision. Instead of continuing to run in a straight line, which would eventually lead to exhaustion, she turned sharply left toward a ravine she had spotted hours earlier, a steep cliff about 50 feet high over a rushing river. And when she reached the edge, with no time to think, no time to be afraid, Elena jumped, her body cutting through the air for 3 endless seconds before hitting the freezing water with an impact that expelled all the air from her lungs, and the current dragged her for almost a kilometer, battering her against rocks, submerging her under waves of white foam, until she managed to grab a fallen log and pull herself to shore, coughing up water, spitting bile, but alive, gloriously alive. And when she looked up, the boars were at the top of the cliff, looking down but without the courage to jump, and Elena laughed, a hoarse and half-crazy laugh, because she had survived the impossible. She had turned a deadly chase into an escape route, and in that moment, bloodied, wet, shaking with fever and cold, she knew that nothing else could break her. Not Hartley, not prejudice, not doubts. And in the next 2 days, Elena navigated the jungle with a clarity and determination that surprised even herself. She hunted, drank, walked, and finally, on the 7th day, exactly on schedule, she emerged from the tree line at the extraction point, where a helicopter was already waiting. And when the pilot saw her, dirty and injured but standing, he spoke over the radio with genuine surprise in his voice, saying she was the first to arrive, that even the male recruits who had departed from closer points were still hours away. And when Elena finally returned to the base in Coronado, exhausted but triumphant, she found the entire class of recruits gathered in the main courtyard. And in the center stood Commander Hartley, his face a stone mask, but there was something different in his eyes, something Elena hadn't seen before. And when she approached, still wearing the torn camouflage uniform stained with mud and dried blood, Hartley did something that shocked everyone present. He stood at attention and saluted, a perfect military salute, and his voice, normally hard as steel, came out hoarse and laden with emotion when he said in front of everyone that Elena Walker had completed the course with the best individual performance in the last 5 years, that she had traveled 20 extra kilometers due to a coordinate error that he himself had made, and that not only had she arrived first, but she had demonstrated the essential qualities of a SEAL: adaptability under extreme pressure, courage in the face of mortal danger, and an absolute refusal to give up. And then, to Elena's complete surprise, Hartley extended his hand, and when she shook it, he pulled her slightly closer and whispered, just for her to hear, that he had tested hundreds of recruits in his career, and that she was among the top 3 he had ever trained. That his initial skepticism wasn't about her capability, but about his own prejudice that he needed to confront, and that she had taught him a lesson he would carry for the rest of his life. And Elena, who had promised herself never to cry in front of anyone on the base, felt tears flow freely down her face. But this time they weren't tears of pain or frustration. They were tears of victory, of validation, of a weight being finally lifted from her shoulders. And the entire class, all those men who had doubted her, began to applaud. A slow clap at first, but which grew until it became thunder of recognition. And when Elena received her gold trident, the sacred symbol of the Navy SEALs, in a ceremony 3 weeks later, her father was there. Somehow, she felt it, watching from heaven, proud, and she touched the medal on her chest and whispered a promise that she would wear that insignia with honor, that she would defend the innocent, that she would be the warrior he always knew she could be, because courage is not the absence of fear. It is the decision to move forward despite it. And Elena Walker had proven, not only to others, but to herself, that she was stronger than any obstacle, more resilient than any pain, and that she belonged exactly where she was, among the best of the best. And in the following years, Elena would serve on classified missions around the world, save lives, lead teams, and become a silent legend in special forces. But that moment in the jungle, running from the boars, jumping off the cliff, surviving, against all odds, would remain forever as the turning point, the moment when Elena Walker died and the SEAL operator was born. And every time a new recruit, man or woman, arrived at the base with doubts about whether they could make it, the instructors would tell the story of the woman who was dropped 20 kilometers farther, chased by wild boars, and still arrived first, because legacies are not built in ease. They are forged in fire, in blood, in sweat, and in tears, and Elena Walker had forged hers with honor, dignity, and an unbreakable will to prove that the human spirit, when truly tested, knows no limits of gender, race, or origin, only limits of determination, and hers was infinite.